This is the End of the Road podcast with your host, Michael Coco. Exploring the horizons we never touch because we're already there.
Welcome, and thanks for listening. Tonight we're off to Severin, Maryland with the political activist and yoga and mindfulness instructor, Reggie Hubbard. Reggie's got a really cool background. On the activist side, he was the former Congressional Liaison and Washington, D.C. strategist for MoveOn.org. He also served as the National Advance League and strategist for the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign, and he also served to coordinate activities for then Vice President Joe Biden and First Lady Michelle Obama. But then, as you're going to hear, his ancestors intervened. And although he's still very much an activist, he now is a teacher in the modalities of sound, vibrations, yoga, mindfulness, and deep body wisdom that he acquired from having been a stroke survivor. Reggie leaves no stone unturned, and I think you're really going to like this one. And without further ado, here's Reggie. Man, you brought all your gongs with you. That's wonderful. Look at all those friends you have in that room.
Yeah, it's my family is benevolent and enormous.
I was wondering, I think you're old enough. Do you remember the Gong Show back in
Absolutely.
the 70s?
Totally.
I was thinking about that, and I even brought, I've been accused of dancing like Gene the dancing machine. So I brought my little Gene the dancing machine.
There you go. Nice.
But I was wondering, the gong, energetically, at least, when I'm growing up, thinking that was a way of like, you were done. We were clearing off your energy and starting anew, perhaps. Right. Like in the Gong Show, traditionally, like to gong somebody meant,
it's over.
Yeah, but I get the feeling that your relationship with is much more connecting with something or harmonizing, perhaps, with the use. Or maybe could you describe that? How you view that? The energetically, the gong.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to. I tripped and fell into this experience, right? Meaning that when I first bought a sound bowl, it was I took a Vipassana retreat. I used to be an activist, and so I still am an activist. Who am I kidding? But I worked for MoveOn.org from 2017 to 2021, which were prime resistance and rebellion years, right? And so you can imagine the energetics of that time was very like chaotic and dispersed and those sorts of things. So I took a Vipassana retreat for 10 days of silence after I quit MoveOn. And at the beginning of our silent sit, every silent sit would begin with acoustics. So it would be like this. And I was like, what is that? It just awakened this whole... And I was also silent too, right? So when you're not wasting energy speaking, all of that energy can be used to help other processes. So I would imagine my sense of hearing was a bit more refined. And it just awakened this ability to sense something bigger than myself that I had not had prior to, and especially in the environment that I was in with respect to all the activism, right? So that one sound led me to buy one sound bowl, which led me to buy scores more. And then that eventually turned to gongs. And I think that specifically with the gongs not only clear space and herald an ending, but it's a consistent beginning. I had an elder tell me that when you strike a gong, it clears a path, not just like literally, but energetically. The elder said when they heard me playing gongs and sound, it was as if it was a supplication to different dimensions and seeking liberation in those dimensions. I was like,
oh, that is cool.
What? For real? You heard that? And so, that, of course, me being the contemplative that I am, I was like, what is that even? How might that be to make that a practice? So every sound I offer, and my relationship with sounds, especially gongs, is a clearance, but also a connection to something that is bigger than us and that connects us all, that's always there. We just aren't aware of it.
Yeah. I also have heard you describe, I mean, you're also a stroke survivor, and
Yep,
how that sort of helped with your recovery.
absolutely.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, so usually in strokes happen every year in the United States to around 750,000 people. So stroke is a very common experience in our population that no one talks about, and there are various standardizations that are part of the recovery journey. So medication and physical therapy and those sorts of things. And because of that experience with sound and from the Vipassana retreat, and then deeper sound and silence and those experiences, I knew and noticed that when I would play sound, and of course I did my own research and all these other things, when I played sound, it got my brain waves to a creative and restful state. And when I had the stroke, I was like, I need to immediately get my brain waves to a restful state, because in that state, healing transpires. In that state, like regenerative rest transpires. And you can imagine the distress in an emergency room, and a step down area that is counterproductive to what one needs when one has a stroke. So I would play my sound bowls early on in my recovery. So the stroke was April 1st, 2024. I played sound before I went to the hospital. I played sound immediately once I was able to, like, once. So stroke happens, everything goes wild, things stabilize, then I pass out because I have no energy, right? And when I wake up the next morning, the attending neurologist comes in and is like, Mr. Hubbard, you've had a stroke and it was in your parietal lobe, all these big words. And I was like, Doc, hold on. Stroke. Okay, cool. And so I would have him repeat that, and I would use sound as an opportunity to find space to receive the information, as opposed to the normal psychological response, which is, I had just been through this experience and I couldn't turn away from it. Like, I needed to be big enough to receive the news, however harsh it may be. And so sound gave a soft place for hard news to land. And then that's when my relationship with sound completely transformed, because I started playing for my doctors and nurses, right? I would play for my neurologists. Like, I was like, you seem kind of stressed, give me 30 seconds. And I would play for them. And my unit, my room became like an oasis of peace on like a critical care ward. Like, it wasn't like Shangri-La. We weren't in Tulum chilling, looking at like the Gulf of Mexico. Like, it's a step down ward from an emergency room, and all sorts of cases are there. And so, like, I knew that my nurses and doctors would be on their rounds in the midst of like news and just stuff that was hard for them. So when they came to see me, even if they had hard news, we were gonna encounter it peacefully.
yeah. Well, that's, yeah. And I also have heard you tell stories about using it in your political activism,
Yeah.
and there was one little vignette that I thought it must have been kind of recent, because it was you had a group of Palestinian activists that were
Yeah.
upset with the Democratic congressman, where they could be allies, but yet they and could you maybe describe how you use sort of your training and practices to encounter that, or
Yeah.
mediate?
What a
That's
yeah, that was
oh,
a
go ahead.
no, that was a wild time. So a little bit of backstory about that. It was in Chicago at the Netroots Nation conference, and I guess it would have been 2023 or two. I think it was 2022. It was relatively recently. And the night before, we were tipped off that like people may want to protest, and so I was in case of emergency, break glass. Like like that's what it was. They're like, "Oh, you're peaceful, you're like a yogic and dharmic practitioner. So like, if things go crazy, we'll just call on you." And I'm like, ooh, that sucks. Like that. Like, how are you gonna like? If you need me, of course I'll say yes, but this sucks. Like this preparation, this is not very well rationed. So of course, very, very long story short, there was an opportunity so the protests happened. We knew they were going to happen. And the room, 1,000 people, 1,100 people in this room, were taken with the energy, right? And there was a situation on the stage that in the hands of a skilled person could have been worked well. What happened was one of the moderators, like a congresswoman, talked the activists down, and it was kind of peaceful and chill. And then the moderator goes, "Oh, now that we've got that out of the way," which is like, yeah, are you kidding me? Like, that's like pouring gasoline on embers. Oh God, how'd the fire come back, you fool? Oh my God. And so that happens, and everyone looks at me. And I was just like, this is not okay. This is not okay. You're sending me into this is so not okay. But I had a 18-inch gong with me, and I needed to break the energy. You know what I mean? And so I go out there, and I had given remarks in the beginning to begin the day, and saying, "Hey, we support, like, I, as someone who is brown and from a member of an oppressed caste, like, always stand in solidarity with those who are being like hurt by the state." You know what I mean? So like, I personally, and we as a board, are in favor of anything that allows for the suffering of the people in Palestine to be like supported. You know what I mean? Like, we need to support these people who are suffering. Like, and we need to stand against anything that increases the suffering of these people. There needs to be an intervention here, was essentially what I was saying. And I come back out there, and in my remarks, I purposefully said, we must learn as a movement to disagree agreeably. And so when I came back on stage, like someone's uncle, was just like, "Okay, so what part of disagree agreeably did you not hear me in the morning?" You know what I mean? Like, what part of that didn't you understand? So I came in not confrontationally, but just like, "Okay, so I hear you. And this ain't at all what we talked about earlier, like 20 minutes earlier." And they start to scream at me. And so they went from yelling at the congressperson to yelling at me. And so I can only describe it as, I felt the energy come towards me. I put one hand on my heart, and I was also wearing all white and barefoot, like about as spiritual as you can be. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm in touch with the ground and like wearing like white. So let's go. You know what I mean? And so I put my hand on my heart, inhale, and basically, and was just like, so. And I started taking on the people that were screaming, and they were just like, we want them to not take the meeting. And I was just like, it's Saturday, there is no meeting, so what are you talking about? You know what I mean? So I just like basically started to lacerate their flawed arguments. So I supported them in principle, but their arguments and tactics I totally disagreed with. And once they started to be a little bit more like angry, I just took out that gong and was like, boom, 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 and just cleared the space. So I could work and try and like bring down the situation. Eventually the situation calmed itself down, and the moderator who screwed things up in the first place was just like, "Now can we?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. Like, you will not begin your remarks until I clear this space." And so I took the gong, and I was like, "Everyone, to rebalance your nervous system, I'm going to play this 3 times." And so I hit the gong 3 times, cleared the space, and then left because I had to teach meditation after that. Like, I didn't even stay around for the remarks because I couldn't, because I was teaching. So like, I didn't know that I was going to be teaching people embodied meditation, because I had to be the gongs, and I had to be so big to take that energy, subsume it, and offer fierce love on the other side of it.
Yeah. And that what you said about being big to receive the energy, and does that kind of go along with what you said about before about, you said some of your teachers had talked about that the vibrations expand and connect with other dimensions, so that's a way of sort of like
Kinda.
expanding us all out,
Sure.
that we're not in this little, we become everything, then can receive more, and not the little things don't, or we get maybe in our sense of perspective is better, or different.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. So we were focused on this small thing that derailed us for like 30 minutes.
yeah,
Can we focus on we received that. That happened. We can't not unhappen that. But from this point forward, can we view things with a big enough heart and big enough mind to see what we have in common and how we may work this and find a solution together as opposed to whatever that was.
yeah, yeah. Well, you also worked with Bernie Sanders, I know.
Yeah.
Is he a yogini in any of this? As it is,
His his
our,
wife is
uh-huh.
and his daughter is like I've worked at the Sedona Yoga Festival with his daughter Heather Cherie Sanders. Bernie is I can't say I've ever meditated with the guy, but I will say that his heart of service and desire to do things right by the people and not be afraid to speak truth to power and not be afraid to disrupt systems of harm, I think is quite yogic
Yeah,
and quite spiritual.
yeah.
Like, because
He's made. Oh, go ahead. I was just going to
no,
say that's.
he's been on, he's been a majority of one or in a righteous minority a lot
Yeah,
in his life. And so that's what like the wisdom calls us to do, like to speak up for those who can't speak, right? To be of service to those who require service and not be so self-aggrandizing, to use what you have at your disposal, not just for your healing, but for the healing and liberation of all beings, right? So he wouldn't speak about it in those terms, but like what I have seen from him and what he stands for, it seems quite spiritual and quite yogic.
yeah. Is that uh, is that related to sort of your ancestral lineage and connection as well? This power of one and this energy you have to stand up for what you
Yeah,
believe in.
yeah, I mean, I'm a descendant from enslaved humans, and I have indigenous ancestry as well, and as well as maybe even indentured servitude ancestry. So when you combine these three distinct experiences, none of my family was wealthy. None of my family was rich. You know what I mean? None of my family had anything other than the community to take care of one another. And my grandfather, who I knew and know well, um, he served in the Navy in 1942. You know, he was in World War II. And fought for democracy and fought for a nation that still didn't view him as a full citizen. So he was on the front lines in the Russian theater in not Russian theater, but in Alaska, and then came home to a segregated world. Right, came home to second class citizenship. And I've read letters in his own hand where he was just like looking commanding officers in the face and being like, under no circumstance did I just come back from a war to sit outside and freeze while you all eat in there. Like, you may not feed me, but I'm not going to get cold out here. That was punishable by hanging. They were like, he could have been court-martialed and or lynched. Lynching was still pretty popular in the 1940s. They didn't care if you were in service or not. You were a black person who was speaking like out of turn, quote unquote. So his stories, and those stories are why like, I'm pretty loud about using what I have in service to other beings. You know what I mean? Part of my ancestry, it was illegal for them to vote at one point, and I've advised presidents and senators and congresspeople. It was illegal for for Black folks at one point to read. I went to Yale, so these opportunities that I have in this skin, in this life, I have to push it to the limit, because people in this skin of whose stories I'm familiar with pushed it to their limit, either politically or spiritually, to give me the opportunity to even have the opportunities. I mean, I joke with some of my friends sometimes. I was just like, I got 1% problems. That I have problems that my ancestors couldn't even imagine. And that's very humbling. And that's part of the reason why, even in yoga spaces or dharmic spaces or political spaces, whatever space I occupy, I remind folks that what we are doing is bigger than us. Like, how will my life, and this is how I live, and of course you can't force that on anybody, but this is how the energy that I put forth, how might my actions create more inspiration, love, freedom, and liberation for all who cross my path? That energy, I think, is why when I had the stroke and I didn't have energy, I could feel thousands of people praying for me. My energy was gone because the energy in this corpus was fighting off the stroke. But I was there kind of wasted with exhaustion. I could feel thousands of people holding me in their thoughts and prayers. That is one of the wildest energetic feelings that I've ever had, because I could viscerally feel something beyond myself, because my conception of self was exhausted. Yet in this exhaustion, I was held by other people's energy.
That is
What?
that is really cool.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that I have listened to you in other interviews, and one thing that I didn't make a connection before, and about the Floyd matter,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah, for
Floyd
sure.
tragedy,
Yeah.
and how that, like, literally, like, this symbolically shutting off his throat chakra, his voice came to such a, energetically, that is got to be, it's so troubling to somebody. I mean, it's troubling to me, but I can imagine it's much more troubling to somebody like you that has a different sort of, yeah, well,
Yeah, I mean, I love the way that you phrase that, because it's quite literally how my teaching practice exploded, right? Like, I saw them take his breath away, and George Floyd was a bigger person. I'm a bigger person. George Floyd was 46 or so at the time. I was 46 at the time. So I saw what happened to him and took it very, very personally.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
if they did that to him, then they would definitely do that to me in a different circumstance. And as someone who is still alive, they took your breath. Oh man, I'm gonna use all my breath and all my words to just like, this will not go in vain. Like, the way they took your life will breathe into my life. And like, I will take that inspiration and teach yoga, teach dharma, like teach anyone who wants to elevate their content. If you on some dumb stuff, you're about to catch it. Like, because I remember I would even have conversations with folks. I was like, so I disagree with you. Would you like to hear my disagreement from my tradition of growing up in rap music? Or would you like to hear it from the Vedic tradition, which I've studied? Or would you like to hear it in the tradition of like Black Baptists? I mean, because there are three different spiritual ways I'm about to skewer you in your ignorance, right? So like, because they choked him mercilessly, I was like, I have a breath and voice, and I will use it.
yeah. And not only that, the millions of people like yourself through the ages who've been shut off and not
Yeah,
being able to speak, they were there. Their voices came out too. I mean, to use,
yeah, no, for sure.
yeah, like, the
And
same thing with your stroke. I mean, that's
yeah, and to that point, I went to there's a memorial to lynching in Montgomery, Alabama, and I've been there. And I've gone there as a free Black man with, like I said, like 1% problems in some ways, and made the commitment to live my life so ferociously because I have freedoms that they couldn't understand. Some of these people were killed for looking at someone, right? How dare a Black person have eye contact with someone? We're going to like burn you to death and hang you from a tree because you looked at someone in their face. That's crazy. So me going to that memorial and basically taking a vow, just like, I will not take my freedom to do what I want in this form, in this country, for granted. And I will probably be a little bit more wild than other people because like I know like you lost your life on America's like addiction to racism. And so I have to be more free because you weren't given this opportunity.
One of the things I think I've heard you say is, is how you deal with yourself as a precursor to how you deal with others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe we're getting into the mindfulness teachings that you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
How do you use that sort of relationship or dynamic when you're in sort of your other roles as a teacher or an activist or any other places?
Right. So I luckily, and with gratitude to the sages, the saints, the ancestors, and all sentient beings, that I came across yoga and mindfulness at the perfect time in my life. I was already in an introspective state. I I went all in for two big time jobs in the Obama administration, got neither of them. So I was just kind of like, it's like asking someone to marry you and they're like, no.
Yeah.
You're like, oh God, what am I going to do now? So mindfulness and yoga, not just the physical practice, but the consistent practice of mind, body, and spirit alignment, that came to me in that moment. But prior to that moment, I mean, I used to drink bourbon for breakfast and chain smoke. I used to curse people out for fun, because I was under such, you name it, distress, unprocessed, you name it. And so when I'm in groups of activists, I offer them compassion because I've been there. Like I've totally been in these circumstances where you think it's a waste of time for you to take care of yourself because you have all these things that you need to do. So like I offer compassion for that. Like, yeah, I had to realize that my health, healing, and well-being were equally as important as that spreadsheet I was pulling the all-nighter over. I've been there. And so I don't approach any of my teaching to different groups with ego. I'm just like, look, I totally understand your skepticism. I was totally that skeptic. So I reach out my hand and being like, let me walk you through how I got over my skepticism if you're interested. Right. So it allows my teaching to be a little softer and a little bit more connected to where the person is, as opposed to, oh, this sucks and you know it, you need to change. Like, who responds well to that? No one. Right. So, but honestly offering from my lived experience through storytelling, where the person's at, as opposed to being like, oh, how are you still there? Like, I'm so beyond that. Like, that never works. And it never, my job as a teacher is to compassionately reflect where I am through the prism of where I've been, and then use the story from then to now as a potential opportunity for someone else to have a similar experience.
Yeah, that's That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Part of your practice also is breath work.
Yeah,
And I think you've categorized that as like a multisensory experience. How does that,
totally.
can you maybe walk us through sort of how you view that
Yeah, for
or
sure.
practice that?
So let me take off my jewelry for first world problems. So usually, like, I incorporate breath work into everything that I do, even the sonic work that I do, because the breath, the friction of the breath on your organs is your tone. So the friction of the breath on your larynx, that friction is your note
Mm-hmm.
in the universal consciousness. Like how air, the friction of air on your vocal cords is the note that you put out in the world, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
breath has everything to do with how we communicate. But we typically, especially, we're on these phones or we're on these computers and we have a slouch posture. Our chin is toward our chest. So you're actually crushing your throat, slouching your shoulders. You're suffocating yourself purposefully in the name of productivity. So what I invite folks to do is just give this space, give it space. The lungs go from the top of your collarbones to the top of your abdomen, right? And we don't use any of that space. And you definitely can't use it if your shoulders are slouched. So that's one experience. The second experience is that you can place one hand on the heart, one hand on the abdomen. And when you inhale through the nose, you hear it, feel it in the nostrils, and feel it in the hands. Multisensory experience. When you exhale, you hear it, feel it in the nostrils or feel it out the mouth, and the chest and the belly deflate. So feeling that expansion and sound and deflation and sound, that spanda, that ebb and flow, which is the rhythm of the universe, like being in touch with that multisensory experience just gets people from this to the beyond. The breath connects us to the trees, which connects us to the stars, right? This thing, and I said this in a teaching recently, I was like, when we breathe in, everything that we need is there. And when we breathe out, everything that we don't need is used by trees and other flora to give us what we need, right? That perfect symbiosis is a metaphysical experience. So when you combine, okay, in through the nose, I feel that. Exhale out the nose or mouth, I feel that. Inhale through the nose, I also feel my chest and belly rising. Exhale, I also feel my chest and belly falling. And then in your conscious mind, you're like, yo, this thing connects me to the universe? What? Right. So layering all that experience allows the breath to have the primacy it should, because without it, you don't exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's a wonderful, can really feel the sort of like the energy behind the breath that I hadn't focused on before.
It's
The
wild.
vibration, the hum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just your own inner gong, so to speak.
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I know you've worked with a lot of the meditation instructors, and I know you were recently on Sharon Salzberg's podcast. Do you
Hmm.
practice? I was wondering, when I was listening to you on her podcast about, she's a big meta practitioner. If
Hmm.
you practice meta to political opponents, I mean, that would seem
Yeah.
like a difficult. That would seem like a difficult, especially in this day and age. But
I do actually, and I don't talk about this often, but I appreciate the question. I would not be talking to you now if it were not for the current president's first administration. he created conditions that required me to dive deeply into yogic, dharmic, and contemplative study and practice. So from an objective rendering, he's my greatest teacher outside of the stroke. So of course I offer gratitude to my teachers, even if I do not agree with their means. I offer gratitude to the teachers. That's one. And number two is that, what's on display right now politically, regardless of your political stripes, we're bearing witness to a whole bunch of people throwing their pain and suffering at each other. Unprocessed grief, unprocessed sense of loss. All of these things are being thrown at each other. And I have tremendous compassion and wish an alleviation of that suffering how pained must one be to look at someone else as less than? May you be free from that suffering. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you be resourced. May you be free from suffering. Of course, I wish freedom from that suffering, because your suffering is causing suffering. So that is how and why that suffering is causing suffering. And so I, of course, would like all beings to have less suffering, because by proxy, that helps all of us. So is it challenging? It was at first. But then, like I said, the people whom I see as political opponents have actually been opportunities for me to show greater grace and compassion. And so I give thanks for that.
Right. Yeah. So it's a difficult holding gratitude is a wonderful practice.
It's hard, and so I will say also that when I teach metta, when I teach compassion practice, I tell folks that you can only give what you have, right? So if you don't have it in you to offer gratitude for, like I just articulated, early in my compassion practice, I was like, may I be okay with the fact that all I can do is not wish harm on somebody. So give myself the grace of being okay with where I'm at, because if I don't give voice to where I'm at, how can I even think about going further?
Yeah. And it almost seems like that making your opponents to put them in a concept, where they're not a human being, but they're this or that, and not sort of recognizing that it's difficult, but yet where you and this goes along with like labeling people, it's a way to discount them,
right?
And it started, I can even imagine like the atrocity in this country when they looked at another human being as property or something.
Or a savage.
A savage is just another form of that. Is
right.
Another. It's a much more ugly manifestation of it, but it's still sort of that thing that you're making somebody a mental construct, you're separating them from you as opposed to embracing them
right.
as another human being, even though they might not reciprocate.
I remember when I was organizing the activists and community for the first impeachment of the current, then former president, it was very important to me to reach out to conservative groups. So here I am working to move on, super liberal. Like, I remember being in meetings, I would be like, listen, this sucks if we don't get anyone who is counter to us on most issues on here. You know what I mean? So like, I'll take it upon myself to recruit people in the conservative movement or whatever, who we don't agree with on anything else other than this. But we have to have them in at least one person. And let me tell you, it was very difficult to endure, Reggie, how dare you be talking to people, all this other stuff. And I was like, no, I have to do it. Like, this has to be, we can't honestly, if we get one Republican group, we can say that it is bipartisan. And it is important for us to say that it's bipartisan or like it's important. And it happened at the last minute, but one person came to the rally that we had the day before the House voted to issue articles of impeachment. And he felt comfortable enough to speak in the program. And everyone was like, Reggie, thank you for your insistence on reaching out to someone who isn't like us. I was like, yeah, because it seems like a movement of all of us as opposed to just some of us. And if we don't show others that we're all the same in some respect, then what are we doing as organizers?
Yeah, I agree. And I think you've even you caused some controversy with some statements about Karl Rove.
Yeah.
But I mean, some people might not remember him, but I sort of do.
Yeah, I would tell people, I was just like, I don't agree with his outcomes, but his mind is brilliant. And he is the best of the best. So while I don't agree with what he's doing and what he's talking about, how he's doing it is instructive for my work. Like, I'm seeking to effectuate outcomes that elevate consciousness. He ain't doing that, but the tactics he's using, if that can be done with a broader aperture, can you imagine the world that we live in? Yeah, people thought I was crazy, but I was just like, nah, like the way he does it, I admire. Like, I mean, in terms of outcomes, like what he's saying, I don't agree with at all.
What about his tactics did you admire?
He brought people together.
Yeah.
Right. He created and marshaled political will to effectuate an outcome.
Right. Even though, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, so.
Well, I mean, so did a lot of people in history that we don't.
Yeah, I mean, but you're not hearing me. Like.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You can honor someone's brilliance and not what their brilliance caused. I was a philosophy major, right? And I'm not splitting hair.
Existential philosophy.
Absolutely, right? So I don't agree at all with I don't agree with the Tea Party.
Right.
But they created a seismic revolution in American politics.
Yeah.
I seek to create a revolution in values and love in American politics. So again, we sometimes get too caught up in outcomes. And this isn't even a moral. It's not a quite like me agreeing with me honoring someone's brilliance is not an admission of loving their tactics or their outcomes. It's not that. It's just like, and I say this to activists all the time, especially progressive activists, like the root word of progressive is progress. And what you're offering isn't progress. It seems regressive. So like, how can I support that? You demonizing the other side is regressive.
Yeah.
That's not progressive. Yeah, I think people miss the finer point, which is that I do not agree at all with what he said and the outcomes that they brought about, but that they were able to create a coalition that brought power and enacted an agenda that doesn't happen often in democratic or progressive circles.
Yeah. Or at least it would bring it or tell me if I'm getting this right, that you admire bringing people together so long as other people aren't hurt in the process.
Absolutely.
And demonizing others. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I mean, because then you're bringing, I mean, I think humans like to be in community. They like to be together. They like to, they like all these things. And as long as they can do that and be inclusive, then I think it's all good. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, good. Well, you want to talk about your group Active Peace Yoga, or
Yeah.
what else should we talk about? I know. Did Mona tell you that I want you to do a guided meditation
Yeah,
at some
yeah,
point?
totally.
Okay. Okay.
Totally,
Okay. Good.
totally. I'll totally do
Good.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, Active Peace is the name of my teaching practice, but also my LLC. Because, like I said, I do political strategy work. I still do communications guiding, meaning you want to say this, but you should say it this way to this audience. You should say it this way to this audience. So, little not message testing, but communication strategy to effectuate outcomes. And I have a teaching practice which has begun to explode. And Active Peace is essentially guided by the following phrase, which is do no harm, but take no shit. And, you know, and the patron saints of the practice are Jimi Hendrix,
Oh,
Prince, and
yeah.
Martin Luther King. You know what I
Cool.
mean? So like black male creatives and visionaries who spoke truth and used sound and words to get people to aspire to higher versions of themselves as opposed to being complacent. And Active Peace was it was generated during the coronavirus, right? So March the 13th, 2020, I was in Boulder, Colorado, and that's the day that everyone went to the store and bought toilet paper for a respiratory ailment. And I was like, this is. And when I was in a yoga teacher training, because the prior 13 months had been the entire impeachment process. So like I had planned on going on all these retreats and hikes and stuff. And when the coronavirus came and everyone was nervous, I was very, very calm. And I was like, this is not normal. Right. So how might I serve from this place of peace and calm to help people who are in tremendous distress? And that was the guiding force of me launching the practice in April of 2020. And, we keep living in unprecedented times where people need respite from distress. So I didn't plan on Active Peace becoming a Dharma transmission. I just thought it was a cool name. But the guiding force has always been, how can we bring people from all walks of life together to be in peaceful community, talk about difficult things, but ultimately lay down what no longer serves us and lift one another up. And that happens through teaching, through sound, through keynote speeches, through political communications, and all these different things. This is what yoga talks about. This is what meditation talks about. I got to find a way to make this active and serve people with it, because you know, everyone else is distressing and I'm not. So let me just see what I can do. So when I launched Active Peace in April of 2020, it was simply to create conditions for folks to find community and deal with distressing news in community through yoga and meditation. And it was a virtual practice, and who knew that an entire career could be built through talking to a dot on your computer. And so Active Peace was born then, and is now, there are keynote speeches that I do like teaching is about 35% of what I do. Political strategy and political communication is the other 2/3, because I believe that yoga the yoga industry sells you the myth that you only have to teach physical practice to be a yogi. But I believe that a yogi or a meditator or one who is a practitioner, that can influence all aspects of your life. So like when I give speeches, I gave a speech last night at this movement event. That is yoga. You know what I mean? The way that I honestly talk about my stroke, and I'm using that to influence not just stroke survivors, but caregivers and practitioners. That union and elevation is yoga, right? So Active Peace essentially tries to create conditions through sound and speech and all these different modalities that you realize you're not alone, and that there are ways that we are connected, that when we utilize them, yield collective derivative benefit.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And I know you've taught Congress people.
Clearly not enough.
Yes, yeah, right. But hey, they need it. They need it more than anyone, or
Seriously.
as much as. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. No, that's wonderful. So, what? How do you, if you could envision a future? Where do you see the trajectory of all this going for you in the future? What would be your aspiration
Yeah.
if you know if you know?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that when I started this 5 years ago, I had I only intended to do it for a couple months, right? I was like, like I'll do this for a couple months. People will like get their stuff together, and I won't have to do this anymore. Wrong. So I would love to create curriculum and experiences where activists feel that they can not have to run themselves into the ground, right? So completely revolutionize the political culture to be less self-destructive and less dogmatic and more creative, nourishing, nurturing, and regenerative, right? Like if we're talking big dreams, like that's what I want to
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
I want to
yeah,
create conditions where progressive political culture lives its values as opposed to just talks about its values. That's one. The second thing I would want is to awaken all yoga practitioners and meditators who care about social justice to do so actively as opposed to passively. People typically care in terms of like, oh, I hope this all works itself out. That's not doing nothing, right? Like, so creating conditions where you feel empowered to live your dreams out loud in service to our collective healing. Woo, right? Like, so that's something that I hope for. And lastly, this sonic practice has gone from hobby and thing, hey, let me try this thing out, to I'm recording now and like creating soundscapes for people to find peace of mind in really distressing times, right? So like if there's a way for this practice to normalize sound as a teaching mechanism and not so much as words, right? So that we can truly live wise speech through clear vibration as opposed to muddled speech through low vibration. That's what I'm
yeah,
hopeful for.
yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful aspiration. Do you have any? Is any of your sound on the internet? I mean,
Yeah.
do you have a CD yet? I should have looked at that, but I didn't see anything. But I was maybe
So
looking in the wrong place.
I have a lot of source files that I'm going to make more publicly available.
Oh, great, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I recorded this one thing at Kripalu about a month ago that this guy on mynoise.net, my new brother in sound, Stefan Pigeon, we recorded a soundscape in addition to, he recorded like a whole hour, 20-minute set that I did at Kripalu. And so I'll definitely make that available for folks. And yeah, the more I do this stuff and the more I do it and people have the experiences that they have, I need to stop being boutique and be a little bit more mass market.
there you go. There you go. Well, that's what bonus for.
Yeah,
So the other,
absolutely.
and now I should have said that you're on Insight Timer, and I'm an
Yeah.
Insight Timer geek.
Okay.
So I'm on that every day. So that's another place people can find some of your. But that, I don't know if that's your gongs. That seem to be more of the guided stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah,
I'm so Insight's interesting in that I'm looking to put more sound out there. And like we'll do it because that's the easiest way to do it. But
yeah,
yeah, I've done a little bit of sound stuff, but this has really exploded since the stroke. To where I gave a keynote recently to the International Association of Yoga Therapists, and I was like, so sound has gone from, oh, this cool thing that I learned during Vipassana to sacred ancient tool that has helped me nurse back my nervous system from devastation.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. And so I play with that lens. I'll tell people this isn't for your entertainment. Like, I'm trying to, like, one funny story I'll share quickly is that through Kapalo, I also do this retreat called Permission and Refuge Healing Retreat for Men of Color. And it has been an idea that it's now 3 years old, and we've served upwards of 80 men ranging from 21 to 83, however they define as masculine, so queer, trans, and cisgendered men, to just find healing through space and rest and walking a labyrinth and hiking and sound and physical practice and meditation, right? So just creating opportunities for people to have permission to be who they are in a place that's safe enough for them to explore it. And the last time we did one was in May. And man, these young dudes, so about 15 years younger than me, we were talking about rest. And I was just like, so let's have a conversation about rest, because my adversarial relationship with rest almost killed me. And I need y'all to hear me when I say that rest is productive. And were it not necessary, it wouldn't be in the grand design of the human experience. And that even if it's small rest repeatedly is better than big rest intermittently, And man, these two brothers were just like, I ain't no punk, like naps are for sissies and all this other stuff. And I was trying to be like compassionate teachers. It's like, hear me out. I don't want you to have a stroke. Like, like bear witness to the miracle before you. And I'm not saying that in a self-aggrandizing way. I'm saying like rest and sound created opportunities for my body to heal from something none of us need to go through. And then they kept arguing with me. And I'll tell you what I did. So I'm going to play one of these gongs. So I looked at them, turned my head to the side, and was just like, okay. So what I did is I could make these big gongs sound like cellos. And while they were sitting there like arguing with me, I went like this.
That'll ground their ass.
Man. So Kripalu they bought this 4-foot gong because they asked me like, what can we do to make your teaching better? I was like, can you buy some instruments since I'm there a lot? And I did that on a 4-foot gong. It shook the floor. And in a minute and a half, everyone in that room was asleep. Wow. And after that, the guy who was like, I ain't no punk, like rest is for sissies, all this other stuff. After he had his nap, I was just like, I'm sorry that I had to do that to you, but like I wasn't going to argue. And what I essentially did was overrode your nervous system. So your nervous system, your the front of your mind was blah 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 blah, but the back of your mind, which responds to deep sound, I was like, whoom. So I cut that on, which cut that off. And he was like, oh, and I was like, that is how I know sound.
Yeah. Well, I need more of that shit too. cut that. I need to think more out of my ass.
Nice.
Or not think out of my ass.
Seriously. Same.
All right. Well, thanks, Reggie. Should we, I guess I should ask you before we do the guided meditation, is Active Peace Yoga the best place for people to reach out for you for what you've been talking about today? So
activepeaceyoga.com. If you're on other socials, Reggie Global, OREGGIE Global, or Active Peace Yoga. But I promise you, if you look up Reggie Yoga and Meditation, there is one of us.
I don't know. That's not necessarily a good thing, but
I know, right?
Maybe there'll be more. There'll be more though in the future.
May it be so.
Yeah. All right. All right. Should we start grounding our asses?
Yeah, nice. That's funny. Yeah, so I encourage everyone wherever you are in the world to notice your body in space, right? Notice if you're seated, how you're sitting. So if you're a little slumped over, I encourage you to press chest forward, shoulders back and down, and maybe continue to shrug the shoulders, right? So up to the ears, back and down. Just we spend hours in a concave circumstance. So let's practice a few seconds being a little bit more convex. And then bring palms together. Notice palms touching. And then once you are aware of palms touching, create friction in the palms. So focus the mind on the palms moving, the heat being generated, and the sound being generated. Take a deep inhale through the nose. Exhale out the mouth. Place heated hands on heart and abdomen. Allow eyes to soften or close. And embodying what we talked about earlier. So begin to notice on the inhale, air coming in through the nostrils, feeling the chest and belly. On the exhale, out nose or mouth, shoulders soften, chest softens, belly softens. Remembering, as we talked about before, that this thing that we take for granted called the breath is essential for our survival. The inhale allows nutrients, oxygen, fill the lungs. On the exhale, carbon dioxide and other things we do not need are released. And for those of you with a mindfulness of the breath practice, maybe you repeat to yourself, I'm breathing in on the inhale. I'm breathing out on the exhale. To just keep the mind from running around on other things. And if focusing on the breath causes you distress, just focus on the sense of grounding in the feet or the tail in the seat. Switch the palms, different palm on heart, different palm on abdomen. Again, shoulders back and down. A more convex shape in the chest as opposed to concave. As you're ready, releasing hands from the body. And placing hands comfortably on the lap. Notice if there's any tension in the body. Let's focus on the face. So bringing palms together, creating a little bit more friction, focusing again, palms moving, sound emanating, heat building. Inhale through the nose. Exhale out the lips. And then take heated hands to the face. Any tension that exists in the jaw, lower cheekbones, neck and throat. How might your tender touch, heated by your friction, offer relief and release in the area of our voice, in the suburbs of our ability to hear? And last time, palms together, friction in the palms. We cannot escape friction. We can learn to play with and manipulate it, though. Deep inhale through the nose. Exhale out nose or mouth. Hands directly over eyes, upper cheekbones, forehead, sinus area, temple, crown of the head. And imagine any extraneous stress removed by your heated hands. And then sitting in this space, adopting whatever posture feels natural for you. I'll lovingly share this sound bowl. This sound bowl is 350 years old. It is the oldest bowl I own to date. And it's meant to clear the mind. So we've done all this stuff to relax the body, notice the breath. Allow this sound bowl to clear the mind of any residue which does not support peace and ease. Feeling how you feel now from center of the chest through the crown of the head, center of the chest through the middle of the forehead, center of the chest down through soles of feet. And it is my prayer and hope that you feel more spacious, more connected, more grounded, and more free. With gratitude, I bow, hoping that this meditation has been of service. Blessing and peace be with you.
Thanks for everything you do, Reggie. And I wish you best of luck in all your future mischief.
I love everything about what you just said to me. Like, 'cause I do a lot of talks, but no one's ever blessed my mischief. So thank you.
Man.
Thank you. Thank you. Like, I feel seen. I feel seen.
You never have problems with that. Yeah, your grandmother be proud.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Reg. I appreciate your time, and stay in touch.
My honor, and thank you for the chance to be of service.
This is the End of the Road podcast with your host, Michael Coco. Exploring the horizons we never touch because we're already there.